Hello everyone, I'm Comet. I use they them pronouns. Today I'm going to be presenting a panel on on aromanticism and also how that the idea of love in our society, and also how that sort of how that sort of how that kind of helps redefine love in a sense in terms of how we perceive it anyway. That's kind of the main idea. But as a little bit of background, um, hello, I use they them pronouns. I'm a senior here at U-M Dearborn, and also I have self-identified as Arrow Ace since middle school. So I've been this for a long while. So I've been in the game. But yes, so glad to have y'all here. If you're watching the video on YouTube, welcome to you too. But yeah, let's get this show on the road. Let's get this rodeo started. So what is this panel about? Like I said, it's about love and aromanticism, what it says on the tin. But also how that intersects and stuff, and the interesting questions that can stem from it. I'm a philosophy major. I love asking questions, especially open-ended ones. So it's just something that I'll just preemptively say this. If y'all want to interrupt me at any time to say something or ask something or give your input on something, literally anything, it's perfectly fine because I love the discussion. This presentation is maybe going to be an hour-ish long or so, it depends. But yes, essentially, feel free to interrupt me. I endorse it. Go for it. I don't have chat open, but I'll be able to see if another notification chat if one comes up, so I'll be able to see that. But yes, this is happening during Aromantic Spectrum Awareness Week, which is happening this year at least, anyway, from the 20th to the 26th. So today's the 25th. So we have today and tomorrow to celebrate this week still, and that's pretty damn cool. So yeah. So this starts off with a more open-ended question of you can answer if you want to, but that's up to y'all if you want to. But I just wanted to get the general question out of preemptively asking what really is love exactly, and if we wanted to get the conversation going preemptively, we can. That's up to y'all. But yeah, so if anyone wants to answer, go ahead. And if not, that's cool too. I can go either way.
It's such a hard question.
It is.
But the thing that popped into my head was love is appreciation for someone as they are.
That's an excellent answer. I really like that. Yeah, it's definitely there's definitely, because there's love as in idealizing someone, and then there's love as in seeing them really for who they are and appreciating them. And it's it's a very that is really interesting, because it's yeah, there's definitely a lot of different that's a good answer. I guess is what I would say. But yeah, thank you for that. But yeah, so basically how I defined it in terms of the presentation was that love is a lot of things. There's most commonly the romantic love, but there's also familial, maybe you'll feel platonic love towards friends, or maybe even queer platonic if you're in a queer platonic relationship and you know what that is. That's also a thing. There's love for things. There's love for you know, if you're religious or something, there's love for God. You know, that's also a thing. There's a ton of different ways to say the word love and stuff. One thing I noted is that it also can mean like sometimes it can just be like synonymous for like caring about something too. Um, like you can say that like you like in a positive sense anyway. You could say that you care about something and that you particularly love it in a certain way. Um, and that's kind of um, yeah, it's kind of like similar in that sense too. It can be anyway. Um, but what we're going to talk about in this presentation is like more of the romantic context of it because it's mostly what people talk about when they say the word love. At least that's what I've seen throughout my entire life. Is that's kind of like the case. So yeah. Oh, we have a chat message. I just saw that. A strong connection between people, including a mutual understanding to support and stand by each other. That's also a really good definition. I really like that too. Um, yeah, there's a lot of ways you can define love, like I said. But yeah, that's for this presentation. I'm just going with this. So yeah. Moving on that, I also would like to like define romance itself, a romantic attraction, because that's also important for finding out what being aro is and stuff. This is like a very vague definition, but I defined romance as like the feelings and like actions involved in specifically romantic love, which is, I mean, yes, I am defining romance with the term romantic in it, which is not the best, but it's like, really, how do you define stuff like this? So romance, there's like a physical part. There's like all the physical stuff you do with romance, such as like kissing or like holding hands or like saying romantic things to each other. There's a bunch of stuff there. But it really is dependent on the relationship and what that entails and everything. And there's also an emotional aspect as well, which is the bigger part of it, is how you feel about that person as well. So that's just the definitions that we're going off for now. But yes. So now to like extend off that, we're going to like, love in our society is definitely seen as like a really it's definitely seen as like a very very like essential thing to have, and like at least in terms of like the United States and like a lot of, you know, at least in terms of like our social sphere, it's definitely essential in a way like society sees it, where you like need to be in a relationship, you need to like find whoever, and it has to like, it's like the best thing of your life, and if you don't do it you'll regret it, you know how it is. And it's something you hear like your whole life, right? So so it's definitely something that pervades like people's minds and stuff, especially is like they'll get caught up in the idea of like, oh god, if I don't find someone, then it's like, what do I do, you know? It's like, what, I feel like I'm missing out, etc. There's definitely a big like aspect of that as well. So that's also something like that. It also it does something to you psychologically, you know, hearing that your whole life, I guess, is what I wanted to point out. But yes, keeping that in mind, we have another definition. I promise these are going to die out soon. We're going to move on to the other topics, but just we're going to talk about amatonormativity, which is, I don't think this word actually stems from an aromantic person, but it does come from someone who did like do a lot of research into this field and this idea, where amatonormativity is a word used to describe how society as a whole is so inclined to say that you need these romantic relationships and stuff, and that you need to like have this in your life and stuff, and all the pressure that happens there. It's something that regardless if you identify as like on the aromantic spectrum or not, it's something that you're exposed to regardless. Like it's just something that that happens to you. So yeah, that's the word for that. Moving on, examples of it would be like um, different people. This could be anybody from like family members to other people in your life, such as like coworkers or like certain friends or something, where they'll say like, "Oh, you need to look for a partner," or like, "Oh, that person, you could get with that person," or something like that, where it's like there's a little bit of social pressure there. There's also stuff like different pieces of media, for example. Um, there's so much media out there, TV shows, movies, literally anything that just has like a romantic subplot in there somewhere. So that's also like a big part of it, is that it's like everywhere. You know, if you go out and look for it, it's like tons of places. Um, so yeah, those are examples. And we're also going to define aromanticism. So this is a romantic orientation, as opposed to a sexual orientation, which pertains to like your sexuality. This is a romantic orientation, meant means that you don't feel any romantic attraction at all, or you feel like a little bit or something. It's listen, it's fluid. It's a very fluid thing. You know, having like sexuality and romantic orientations and stuff like that. It can be very fluid, but it's definitely up to the person, and what they feel. But yeah, that's aromanticism by definition. Um, if you wanted to get the like version that is like a lack of sexual attraction, that's asexuality, and that's being asexual. So that's also that. Speaking on that, yeah, it's essentially what I said. People can be like both asexual and aromantic. They could also be like one or the other, or you could just be neither, of course. Um, um, yeah, there's definitely a lot of forms of attraction. There's platonic, there's uh familiar, there's like everything. There's like a form, there's like tons of forms of attraction. But basically, in terms of like these orientations, people usually focus on sexuality and then sometimes romantic orientation. And that's, in terms of the queer community anyway, that's usually what we touch on. But yeah, um, touching on that, we're going into more so a lot of stuff in the Arrow community, what Arrow people, go through and stuff, and just more on that. So different definitions of stuff like the aromantic spectrum. Like I said, if you know asexuality, then you know that there's like an asexual spectrum, and that you can be all sorts of forms of asexual. Like you can be like gray asexual, for instance, where you only feel asexuality, you feel a lack of sexual attraction sometimes, or in like specific situations, etc. There's also an aromantic version of that called gray aromantic or gray aro, if you want to shorten it. There's definitely a lot of these words, these identities do have like shortened versions and stuff, just because it would be like a handful to say otherwise. In this case, aromantic would be shortened to aro. So yeah, that's that on that. And anybody who like doesn't identify as aromantic is alloromantic, meaning that you do feel romantic attraction, totally, and you're not on the aromantic spectrum. Similarly, with asexuality, there's also allosexual, which is someone who does experience sexual attraction and is not on the asexual spectrum. So moving on with that, this part, I didn't know where to really put in the presentation, so it just ended up here. But yes, a big thing that that people have said online for like years, and it's worth talking about, because it's like it's it's definitely have lasted um a long while where a lot of people online in particular, but there's definitely everything. There's a lot IRL as well, where um, people will say that like aromantic people don't get any form of discrimination at all, and that it's like not worth being a part of the queer community and stuff like that, which is a bit of a weird take, honestly. But no, discrimination certainly does exist. There's social pressure, of course. There's like there's definitely a lot of like people will try to like stereotype aromantic people as like, oh, they're like cold or unfeeling, or they're alien, or they're like, you know, not human, or something of the sort. You know, they'll do something like stereotype you or like dehumanize. Also just like general harassment, that's a thing. And particularly with people who are allo-aro, where they do experience sexual attraction but do not experience romantic attraction, one thing that they particularly experience is the fear that they're being seen as predatory. That's also a big issue, particularly with people who are allosexual and aromantic. So that's also a thing. One case that people try to make with asexuality and aromanticism is that, well, yeah, it does happen for both, is that people will say that that aromanticism and asexuality stems specifically from trauma and only trauma alone. For some people that is the case. It's not everybody though, and it really depends on the person. But people like to make this case because they want to use that as an excuse to like delegitimize being, you know, either identity. Just know that it's just, think of it like this. Even if it were the case that it like stemmed from like trauma or something like that, it wouldn't make sense. Like why wouldn't that still be a legitimate orientation or sexuality, you know, or romantic orientation? You know, it doesn't make sense why that would not be legitimate. But yeah, basically, that's that on that. Along with that, this was also something I wanted to touch on, was like people who, you know, identify as asexual or aromantic or on those spectrums. They can feel loneliness. It's not like it's a requirement. Like if you're aromantic and you identify as that, it's not like that's something that like happens just because you're aro or ace. It kind of happens because like it can happen anyway because of like the way, you know, society is towards aro and ace people, and you know, it's kind of something where it's like you're not exactly, or like you're perceived to not exactly be that much of like an ideal partner, because it's like the idea that you're perceived to be lacking something, you know, in that aspect. So it is a thing. And obviously like people have, you know, their own boundaries with stuff and need certain things in a relationship, and that's totally fine. But yeah, for me personally, I know it's something where it's like I haven't really cared, because it's like I'm one of those people that's like I don't mind living alone with like 5 cats, like hell yeah. But yeah, it's something where it's like it pervades the aromantic community and asexual community sometimes. But yeah, it's just you can definitely like be all right and be aromantic or asexual. It doesn't make you broken or anything like that. And that's another idea that people try to say, is that, oh, you're somehow less you're like broken, or like not, you know, there's something wrong with you if you identify as this, which is not true. I mean, I'm personally, I think I'm doing all right. I'm doing relatively all right, you know, if that counts for anything. But yeah, moving on to that, uh, I want to talk about what it means to be void punk. So this is interesting. This originated, I think, well, let's see, maybe I know the number 2014 pops into my head. I don't know if that's true though, but it has been around for like a bit. Um, where this is like a certain subculture and aesthetic associated namely with being aromantic. You don't necessarily have to be aromantic to use this aesthetic or be a part of the subculture though, where it's like arrow people get like, you know, there's such a dehumanizing factor when it comes to like identifying as this, that it's like we just said, can I swear on here? I heard a nod. I saw a nod. Okay. Listen, arrow people have been through like so much shit with like dehumanizing and stuff that we're just like, fuck it. We'll just embrace it. We'll just be like, yeah, I'm not human, so what? What are you gonna do about it? So it's like a cool little aesthetic and stuff where they have fun with it, you know, they run free with it. It's very fun. I like it. You don't have to be arrow to identify as that either. You can identify as like another ace identity or certain neurodivergencies. People with certain neurodivergencies can also use it. The author said anyway, who made it. But yeah, basically, anyone who has felt that they've been dehumanized by society in some way can go ahead and use it and have fun. So yeah, that's another point I wanted to talk about that a lot of arrow people have done and made. Non-amorous. So this is a term that's not the same as aromantic, but it's like similar in a sense where non-amorous specifically means that you don't want like these like long-term relationships, whether it's like a romantic partner or a platonic partner or queer platonic, what have you, like a specific long-term partner in that sense. So that's just for like any like orientation is when you self-identify as that, for when that's just not something you want to do. Again, you don't have to be aromantic or asexual to identify as this. It definitely is the case that a lot of people who do are probably like aro or ace to some extent, but it's not like a requirement. If you want to use that term, hell yeah, go ahead, go all for it. So yeah, that's non-amorous. And we also have romance repulsion, which is interesting because it talks about less about what your romantic attraction is, and more so how you feel about romance and doing those sorts of like romantic actions. So romance repulsion means being averse to romantic stuff, like you know, all the sorts of stuff like holding hands, kissing, etc. That's being like averse to it and being uncomfortable with it essentially in or like a real life setting, or even like not in real life, honestly. That's romance repulsion. But there's also people who are romance favorable as well as arrow, who do like doing all sorts of that stuff and do like may even like the aesthetic or something of a lot of romantic things, and but just simply don't feel romantic attraction, and that's also incredibly valid. Personally, I'm not that big of a fan of it, but hey, if you want to go ahead and do that, hell yeah, you know. There's also romance indifference, where it's just like you don't really care either way. But yeah, this is something where I have definitely seen people identify as either or, even without being an ace or arrow, like on either spectrum of that. You can definitely just like use that word if you want, or any of these. So yeah, a specific subset of aromanticism is love queer aromanticism, which is essentially like you because the definition, because like love as like society sees it, that definition is like so it's sometimes like very restrictive, sometimes in certain ways, and I'll talk about that a bit more later on in the presentation. But yeah, it's definitely something where it's like, you know, aromantic people can't really conform to that. So one form of aromanticism is love queer aromanticism, where you just reject the traditional idea of like what love means, and you just redefine it and you do your own thing essentially. And this is something that's probably a bit more popular with romance favorable aromantics, which is cool. And you know, I like that. You know, you don't have to worry about the traditional idea of what romance and love is supposed to be. You can just run with it and stuff, and that's pretty cool. Love queer, I mean, you could be aro and still be in like queer platonic relationships, or you know, you could also just be like, you know, I don't like pursuing that sort of stuff. Um, I feel like with love queer, maybe they'll do that for queer platonic relationships or something, or maybe at least like theoretically speaking. Again, it depends on the preference. It depends on what you are and aren't comfortable with. But yeah, that's essentially what love queer romanticism is. And now here's loveless aromanticism, which is like the same idea of rejecting the traditional idea of love and romance and what that means, except it's like you don't really want to like you just like, no thank you. Just like I don't really want to I don't really want to engage in like the romantic love and attraction stuff. I just kind of just, you know, it's something where it's just it's to an extent actually where it's like loveless aromantics will say that they don't experience love at all, which is a very it's a very interesting thing. I know for like a good while I personally identified as like loveless arrow for like a long while. Do I still do that? I don't know, maybe. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like I have to lay on my bed at night at like 3 in the morning and think about it. But but yeah, that's it's definitely something where it's like it's definitely very different, where you just reject love altogether, like just conceptually. And there's, you know, there's a good reason behind it. You know, you don't feel romantic attraction, and it just seems like something that's very much, you know, it doesn't feel something that's good to think about or good to like, you know, try and feel. You know, for me personally, it's kind of like bleh. It's kind of like a bit of a drag, you know, to just like, yeah. You know, so it's like it's something where it's like they don't even want to like associate with the word love at all, which is like valid. So yeah, so going into why this particular would be important, we are going into our last subsection, which I mean we're doing pretty good on time. Again, if y'all, I'm gonna take a sip of water. If y'all have questions, like go for it. Honestly, you can just pop in and ask. But yeah. So yeah. Sorry, hold on a second. Listen, you know how like water goes down your throat a little bit wrong? I need to like cough for a second. So there's one. Okay, we're back. All right, so this is like the last section or so. Honestly, I've been like speeding through these slides for what the content is supposed to be. It's only like 6:35 or something. So it's like, again, if you have questions, feel free to interrupt me. Otherwise, I'm probably just going to speed through this, and it's like only a handful of slides left. So this is going into like the more philosophical aspect of it all, and like trying to like unify these different ideas, and like, I don't know. I'm just trying to ask the bigger questions tonight, all right? You know? So going on, oh, yep, got something in chat. Does loveless aromanticism also include a lack of familiar slash friend love? That is a good question. I would say by definition it does. But I would say it's something where it's like you can feel companionship and you can feel like friendship and not have it be like a form of love, right? Like you can still have like friends and you can still care about people and um just not feel a certain love in that sense. um I would definitely say that because of like what loveless aromanticism is, that like yes, it is included. um but again, it's something where it's like you can always just like ask that person in particular how, if you meet someone who's identifies as that in real life, how they personally feel about it. But yeah, I like I said, by definition it should, but again, it probably depends on the person and what they like see it as. But yeah, you can definitely still have friends and hang out though, and still be a loveless arrow. That's still something you can definitely do, for sure. So going into like more of the meat of it, exactly does love mean for someone who's aromantic? And this is an interesting question, because it's the aromantic community is so diverse in how they identify as aromantic. It's really hard to get like a definitive opinion about it. Um, Sometimes, depending on the person, it can just be like, it's not really my thing. I don't like it. It's not. I really don't like the concept of love as it is, especially with how it gets defined and how people push it on to others, and the whole thing where like it doesn't feel too right, right? And then for some others, it's like, well, I don't feel romantic attraction, right? But there's still a lot there that's like really that I really like, and I really enjoy, some of the physical aspects of it, or I enjoy some of the aesthetics of it, or some of the like, you know, enjoying like certain things, an idea at least, or doing certain things that involve, or usually would involve, love or romance, etc. But yeah, it again, it really depends. Like I said, because there's like, there's loveless arrows, there's love career arrows, there's every type of arrow under the sun. There's a lot of people, and there's a lot there. What I've generally seen is that they do reject the mononormative concept of love anyways, because it's just like I feel like when you're arrow, it's something extremely hard to conform to. It's like it doesn't feel viable to put in a sense. Like it's kind of like, nah, it doesn't feel like it's usually something that you can conform to that easily as someone who's arrow. But that's just what I've seen. Again, I've been a part of the community for like a bit, so generally, yeah, that's usually the case. But it depends. Um, Now, when it like comes to romantic love, right? There's like a lot of, we don't think about it, but there's like a lot of ideas and stuff that it's like, here's what you have to adhere to, that like the idea that you need to be monogamous, have only one partner, that you need to like date a certain amount of times, or like that there's certain steps that you need to follow, that there's certain story beats in that relationship that you need to like hit on the mark, and that you need to like follow through to its conclusion. It's like a, it's like, it's like you, it's like there's a map or something. Like, is do we need to like go into relationships like it's like a little pirate map, and there's like a treasure chest at the end, and you and you like get all the spots and stuff, and there's like a little riddle on the side of it. I don't know. Listen, like it doesn't. It's like society is so weird about it, right? It's there's parts of it where it's like there's so just, why are these rules? Like all this stuff about like it's weird. It's weird. To me, it's weird anyway. But we can definitely go into discussion and talk about that more. Up to y'all. So yeah. So like yeah, there's again with being like Arrow, there's a lot that you just like, even if you're Arrow or not, you just have like certain comfort levels with things, right? And there's just like certain stuff where it's just like, I don't like doing certain stuff, in a relationship, and I don't like doing all that. So it's just like it's hard to conform for like probably a lot of people, regardless if you're Arrow or asexual or anything like that. And this is a problem that, I would say arguably asexuals do have some trouble with too, because a lot of relationships, sex is, sometimes a big part of it. And it's like, if you don't feel sexual attraction, or you don't like want to have sex and stuff, that can be like something where it's like, that can be a deal breaker for some people. And preferences are definitely preferences. But like I said, it's something where it's like it can be hard to conform to, right? And it just doesn't, it doesn't vibe with a lot of people, right? So yeah. Speaking of, there's definitely one of these constrictions is like different forms of love, of romantic love, that happen in our society that are looked down upon or like are discriminated against. Just to name a few, I know that historically interracial couples have been through a lot with that. I don't have the exact details on everything involving that, but it's definitely something where there have been protests about it, and definitely a lot of like, it's something where it's like people are just incredibly racist sometimes, and it's just, it's horrible that people have to go through that. And there's also queer love as well, and this can happen from being queer in terms of being like gay or bi or pan or anything, and how that affects how people perceive you in a relationship. There's also stuff specifically involving people who are polyamorous, and how that affects their relationships. And it's there's a lot there where it's like, these aren't seen as traditional, quote unquote. So it's like like people just have a hard time accepting shit. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things. But yeah, there's that. There's also queer platonic relationships, which you don't necessarily have to be Arrow race to have a queer platonic relationship. Essentially what that is that a queer platonic is a relationship that's neither platonic nor romantic, but could be like something weird in between. That's usually how people define it. And it definitely the bounds for that are definitely dependent on the person and the relationship, and what the people in that relationship are okay with, etc. Asexuality also go through like a specific specific type of discrimination with this, where again, you know it's something where it's like sexual attraction, get people get upset, when they find out that someone doesn't, experience sexual attraction, when, doesn't want to have sex because of that, or like even if they do, there's like a conception involved of like, oh, is this person being predatory if they're asexual, and then, sex favorable, if they don't feel sexual attraction. There's a lot there. So that's also a thing that happens with a lot of asexual people and people on the asexual spectrum as well. So yeah, this next part will be about we'll talk about a little bit about abuse in like relationships and stuff like that. So just warning for that for anyone who like needs to like mute Zoom or anything. I'll give you a second to do that while I take another drink of water. But yeah. So yeah, there's love can be a big pretext for abuse in certain relationships. People like to use that to like try to like keep people in bad relationships, where it's like, oh, it's well you love them, right? So you can excuse this and this shitty behavior, and you can like, you have to stay with them because of this and this, and it's definitely something that is used a lot in stuff like that, where it's this idea of love and like loving someone that can like, it can be construed in a way where it's like it can be used against you sometimes, and it's something that there's it's definitely like not great for sure. I know people would probably say that like, maybe this doesn't count as like love because it's abuse, but it definitely depends on your definition of it. This is again a word that has a ton of different meanings. It's very vague, but just putting this in, if we put like, we put a lot of stuff under the love category, and if we only put like, I feel like, is this something where it's like, is it really viable to put like only good stuff under the definition of love, right? Is this only something where you can put like, is love supposed to be an objective good, I guess, in that sense? Is it meant to be only good things? And that's definitely a discussion we can have if we want. But yeah, but for any relationship, look out for yourself, of course, know your comfort levels, and know when you deserve better. So that's my PSA on that. But that's just another example of how love isn't always seen as like a good thing in every context. So going on that, I'm kind of just asking this general question here, and we're really like, this is probably like, we have a couple slides left and then we're good. Is like the idea of, is love like actually good? If it's like, if it's something where these things can happen, such as like abusive relationships, where people use that for something bad, or like certain ideas of love being discriminated against, you know, it's is love really like always a good thing? And we can say that like love itself might be good and it might get like misconstrued, but then that begs the question of how is love good, and like wondering, you know, where are the bounds between love that is and isn't good and what defines that, you know. So it's definitely, this isn't something that you can just like answer in a PowerPoint slide, right? It's something that you really do have to like think on and follow your own conclusion with. It's definitely not something that I can answer for you. Especially like since I have my own perspective, which is being arrow, and it's a perspective that isn't really too keen on relationships, romantic relationships to begin with. So it's definitely something that we have to like think about on our own terms, for sure. One thing is that love is definitely one thing. A lot of arrow people get is like the phrase "love is what makes us human." You can definitely see how that aspect plays in with like stuff like void punk, for instance, where there's a dehumanizing aspect there of like, you know, well, if love is what makes us human, then I guess I'm not human. And stuff like that, right? So essentially, yeah, playing on that, we're getting into more of like, and we will with the next slides get into more of like, why would it be that like love is what defines humanity, right? And that's something to also think about. And so yeah, being arrow, it puts it into perspective, right? Of like, what does love mean in terms of the collective like humanity as a whole, right? And what that really entails. So going on that a little bit more, we're going to like look at like, and these next two slides are just like little comparisons about like, because of like the love is what makes us human statement, it's like, you know, it doesn't, we can definitely say that, you know, if you believe that arrow people exist and that they feel the way they do, then, well, no, love is not what makes us human, right? So these next two slides are kind of like talking about, well, if we wanted to say what exactly makes us human, then one argument people make is that empathy might be, and that the fact that we're able to like look at someone, you know, in a certain situation, and are able to go, well, I feel bad for them because I went through something similar, or something of the like, that could be, some people define that that's like a case of like what makes us human, I guess, or like what defines humanity. But again, as like a question, you know, that's not, for me personally, it doesn't feel like the best definition either, because there's definitely a lot of people who struggle with the idea of empathy, but are still, you know, are still compassionate to people, are still kind to people, you know, that still do good. And, you know, even if they have low empathy and they struggle to relate to people because of something, then, you know, they can still be all right, you know. You know, you're not inherently evil if you like if you like struggle with empathy, you know, because you can still, that doesn't stop you from doing good, right? But yeah, that's one half of that. So if we critique that and we say, well, okay, maybe it's like compassion that is what makes us human, the fact that we can like care about each other and that we can like, you know, help each other out and stuff, and that we, even if we don't always empathize, we can like still be nice to each other and form connections. And this slide is kind of like two different arguments, because there's compassion as like what defines humanity for what it is, and then there's also like this separate one where it's like a lot of people, it seems like a lot of people nowadays are more and more like getting the definition that, you know, perhaps what makes us human is not even necessarily compassion, but just the fact that we have social connection with each other, and that we and that we have communities where we do, you know, historically, you know, like trade, and we talk with each other, and we, you know, we again we form communities overall, and that are at least meant to benefit the whole. um yeah and you could say that that could be something that defines humanity, at least in terms of like how it might differentiate from like other living beings, I guess. And it's like, for me personally, and I'm just going to like add this on, is like, yeah, you can definitely put that as like a definition historically, but I don't know if this is something that particularly applies to everybody, because it's like there's definitely a lot of people who do not prefer social interaction, who, you know, maybe they don't, you know, have, maybe they don't like, you know, have that many connections, or maybe they don't want that, you know, where, you know, that's also a valid point to raise, where it's like, what is that really? So that's also like a case that you can make there. But that's just me like trying to remember my point off the top of my head, and after I like thought about it for like maybe 10 minutes. So yeah, that's that part. um and this is like second to last line maybe, where this is going into, well, it's not only humans, right, that probably feel love, you know, because for instance, a lot of people are starting to like find out, and if not find out, then they're starting to report on and starting to talk about, you know, a lot of animals that do show pretty strong signs of feeling love. For instance, there was, I'm I'm taking right now an environmental ethics class, and it was very interesting because one of our readings was about how like they mentioned how primates, for instance, showed signs of affection with each other, like, you know, like certain hugs and kisses and stuff, and other signs of affection that, you know, strongly relate to some type of, you know, love of some kind. Um, so that's something as well that, you know, it's a really interesting point. Um, and even like compassion and stuff like that, that's something where it's like, well, you know, animals can be compassionate to each other as well. What does that mean? You know, so I guess that goes to the question of, you know, does love itself need to like only be for humans? Why is this something that has to like define humanity as a whole, etc., etc.? um so I guess this is just touching on that point of like, why why do we like need this idea of like love is what makes us human in the first place, right? um so yeah, going on that, the basic idea for this panel, and we're wrapping up here, is that I just wanted to like, I wanted to talk about aromanticism for sure, but I want us to like also, even if you don't identify as aro, or you like, you know, you whatever, you know, it's something to that's at least good to think about, especially speaking as someone who's been aro for like years. I feel like for the longest time I never ran out of things to think about in terms of being aro. It's such an interesting orientation to have, I guess, because it really puts this bigger picture together of like, if you know, if there are people out there who don't feel romantic love or feel love at all. You know, it's like, what does that mean for everybody else? You know, where it's like, you know, there's a bigger picture there. There's like a bigger idea and so many questions to ask, you know, and it's a really, I've always thought of it as a really interesting thing. For you, it might be different, of course, but I know for something like this in particular, it's something that I'm particularly passionate about. But yeah, um, again, I don't really like. I feel like through like talking about this and through like internal bias, I've probably answered some questions in a way, but I don't want you to like. I don't want you to necessarily have my answers. You know, I want you to like think about, you know, this and think about like, you know, what does this put into perspective and what can we like think about from this, um and just really thinking about, like I said, the overall bigger picture here. um but yeah, um that's so essentially, whether you feel romantic love or whether you might not, or you know, whatever the case may be, you are perfectly valid. And I'm going to say this and I'm going to fight to the death about it. You are 100% valid, regardless of your orientation on it and how you feel on it and stuff. It's definitely, love is definitely a weird thing, and it's probably even weirder hearing it from an aromantic perspective. I definitely understand, because I'm, you know, it's something where it's like people have this like emotional aspect about love, and it's like I feel like I have no choice but to see it, at least from like a partly clinical aspect, because it's just not something I feel, right? So it's just something, you know, I've tried to like make sense of, I guess, a lot. So yeah. um and no matter what, you know, don't be afraid to at least like practice self-love too. That's also a form of love. Or if you are uncomfortable with the word love, which is extremely understandable, self-care, you know. So just, you know, I guess also as like a different take-home message, take care of yourself and stuff. So yeah, uh that's not it for my presentation. We basically a little bit short of an hour. So yeah, that's everything. If y'all have questions, go for it.
Yeah. First of all, amazing presentation. I
Thank
love it.
you.
Thank you so much for hosting it for us. So, so the question I have, like, so you know the saying, "Love is a choice, not a feeling."
Oh, a little bit, yeah.
Like, because like the thing is, that's a very common thing where it says like you have to work on it or something like that. But like, would you like, how would you translate that to like from an arrow perspective? Because it's not really a choice or a feeling at that point, but like, would it like like, is there any other context to put it in, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that like for me, it's like it's definitely not a choice because you know, I can't really choose on that matter. It's something where it's like, personally, I've been in like relationships and stuff and I've realized this doesn't work out for me. This isn't what I'm into, etc. um it's From an arrow perspective, I guess it's really not a choice, but you can still choose to care about people and choose to make an effort to care about others and to like form connections in that sense, um, regardless of like what your comfort is with certain things and how you feel about that. Oh yeah, thank you for stopping by, Dr. Brainer. I just saw that now. But yeah, um, yeah, um, it's I guess for me, it's like it's not a choice, but you can still choose to care about people and choose to like form whatever, you know, relationships you're comfortable with. So yeah, if that answers the question.
All right, thank you. Yeah, that does. Yeah, I like that. I like that take a lot. It's your take, and I fine. I think that's more important than trying to answer a question like that. But yeah.
Yeah,
Uh
I mean, we could talk about it, like,
no, I think I agree with that. Caring about people is a choice. So
yeah,
that would make sense.
yeah, because I guess from what that saying sort of entails is that it's trying to like it has that hidden premise of like love takes effort, but like so
Mm.
does like any form of connection, I suppose. So I guess if you want to put that into perspective, then yeah, of course, any form of connection with other people takes effort. Um, but yeah,
So my other question, which is not really tied into directly into it, but like it's more about the stereotype, and I wanted to know if that is
go
a
for
thing
it.
that could exist.
Go for
Don't
it.
worry.
No, no, go for it.
No, no, don't worry about it. The thing I'm trying to say is, you know how the other thing about the other stereotype of love is like love is blind, love is irrational, all that kind of stuff that gets thrown about all the time.
Mhm.
But would that like impress a converse implication that an arrow person is cold and calculating, or when they look at a people, they just assess them for face value? Is that like a stereotype, or are but like, or should I guess the expectation should be that everyone's just people. They just process things differently. How would that work? I guess.
Yeah, I think I've definitely seen it from the perspective of like um people have like said to me before, "Oh, you're lucky you don't feel romantic love because you don't have to worry about this and this." And I'm like, "I guess." It's like you don't have to worry about romantic relationships and stuff. I'm like, whatever. It's something where it's like I I don't think anyone looks at like an arrow person and thinks they're smart. I've never had that before. If that's part of what you're saying, there's definitely
Sociopathic. That's the word.
yeah, yeah, no.
That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
Actually, actually, I meant I almost put that like on the slides actually because that is a big thing. Is that they'll just see you as someone who like doesn't have empathy or doesn't care about people when that isn't like necessarily the case. Um, it's yeah, no, didn't we definitely get that? Yeah,
Okay.
so that's something where yeah, they definitely see you as like sometimes as like colder, like emotionally distant, something of the sort like that. But yeah.
Hmm. All right. Yeah. Uh, I don't have any questions. Those are two questions I did have. I
All
think
right.
that covers it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Um